Welcome to our third webinar of our UX webinar series. This is called, this one, I'm sorry, is called How to Structure Your App's Content to Lower Abandonment Rates. As you know, we have been tackling different problems that could be affecting your apps and our apps as well. So we decided to keep informing you and ourselves of new ways to improve these situations, which are fairly common. You'll see in a few minutes. But before we start, I'd like to introduce two great people, two great persons, two great designers and friends. The first one is Misael. He's a UX designer here at Nearsoft. Hi.
Hey Jorge, how are you? How are you, everybody? I'm really happy to be here again, talking about this topic that I'm really passionate about.
We've made Misael work a lot. This is his second webinar in a row, so thank you. Special thanks to Misael. And next to him is a newcomer. His name is Axel Valdez. He's a UI front-end designer. We haven't seen him live since, I don't know, a year or so. So welcome back.
A lot.
Since a lot.
Yeah. Well, hello everyone. Happy to be here, joining you.
And I'm going to be your host for today. My name is Jorge Simons. I'm the content creator of the team. We're part of a bigger team called the UX team at Nearsoft. We are passionate about creating products and also boosting up the experience of existing products. Our magic is between the business side and the user side. So if you have any doubt, feel free to contact any of us. We're made up of designers, business developers, UI designers, UX researchers, and all those sort of things. Anyway, our time today is going to be well spent. We're going to be talking about how to define your product's vision, how to structure the architecture to make that vision happen, how to define the content strategy for that specific architecture, how to create habits of use for your product, which is sort of like a funnel. First you have the vision, then the architecture, then the content strategy, and that is supposed to create a very healthy addiction, like my addiction to Netflix. And after that, we're going to be summing it up with some takeaways, which are very summed up points that you can take home. And we'll be listening to any questions you have with the Q&A. Remember, you can tweet us using the hashtag NearsoftUXWebinar. That's hashtag NearsoftUXWebinar. Or you can send any questions on the chat panel on the left of this video. So I'll be tuning in there to make sure I'm getting all your feedback. So let's get it started. This quote is very scary because I think a lot of what we work for might be lost in just 3 days.
Exactly. This is something that I believe everybody, it's been there in one occasion or two. We as product teams here at Nearsoft also face this problem often, and then we realize that this is something common that is happening in the industry. That is, when you put your effort for months in a project and then you throw your product into the market, you start to notice that people abandon your application after the first install. And then we realize that this is something average, that almost every application loses up to 77% of their daily active users within the first 3 days. This is according to Quetra.
And that's scary, right?
And that's really scary.
But that's not the only the only scary thing. If you wait just a month, just 30 days, the abandon rate goes up to 90% of your users.
But the story does not end there, because if you wait for 90 days without doing anything to improve your application, you will lose over 95% of your daily active users, which is crazy.
Oh my God, that's like a lot.
Yeah, but we're not here to scaremongering. We're actually here to present you a solution. But in order to provide a solution, we need to understand why this is happening, right? And there are some common issues. What you see on screen are major topics that we should do a webinar for each one of them. But we're going to have time only to talk about one. But let's just sum things up here. The first one is related to performance. Is your application loading fast enough, or perhaps is it slow when you change between sections, or perhaps it crashes?
Yeah, and that will be bad.
That will scare people away.
Yeah, the content structure also. How people come to your application and find the content they're looking for, because they're coming up for content.
Now, let's say that your users found the content that they were looking for, but is it easy to accomplish the task? is it easy to accomplish the task that they are looking for to do on your application? So this is related to interaction and usability issues.
Yeah, the next one is security. Is people able to trust their personal information to your application? Is it safe with you?
And the other one is related to how you talk to users. Are you sending enough notifications? Perhaps you are sending too much, or perhaps you are not sending any, and users might forget about you on their phones. Remember that your application is just another one of the many that we all have installed in our phones. But on this webinar, we're going to talk about content structure, and we chose this topic because it's relatively easy and it involves everybody on the team.
And you can take it away from the beginning.
Right, it's just something it's just finding the perfect way to organize the content, the structure, and the system architecture of your application.
And I feel like if you have a good content structure, you're probably going to be fixing a lot of the performance issues because the developers will understand exactly how it should work, and then how to communicate with the notifications and alerts and stuff like that. So actually, content structure is not only a good entry point, it also might prevent the other known issues we're seeing here.
All right, and let's start by the beginning. The first thing that you need to know in order to structure the content of your application is what is it that you're building, or what's your vision of your product. And what we have here on screen is a really simple exercise about sentence completion. And this is the work of Nickel Blase. Shout out to him and his great work. And basically what he's stating here is that you should define really specifically the vision that you are trying to build with your product, what you're trying to accomplish. Let's say that you perhaps want to make the world a better place by solving the way people travels, right?
Yeah, also you need to put down who's your target audience. Who are you solving a problem for? And what is that problem?
Right. Every product should solve one particular problem. If you're trying to solve everybody's problem, you will end up by doing very little. And by this, you need to define the strategy. I mean, what is it that you are going to give them? What's your application is going to do? Exactly.
And how will you know when you reach your vision, when you solve the problem of the users? And usually you should define some metrics that tells you, okay, this is your daily active users or whatever, that tells you accomplished, you solved the problem, you accomplished the thing.
How will you know that you are being successful if you do not measure it in a way, right? Throughout this webinar, we're going to be talking about this fictional application. We're going to provide a way for people to eat healthy, and mostly young people that do not have enough time to cook for themselves because they might be in a rush, or perhaps they do not have an idea exactly what to cook with the ingredients that they have on their fridge.
Okay, so I'm going to read the filled up text here, so you can listen to the vision of this application. In order to provide a way for people to eat healthy, our product will solve for young people who work the problem of being busy and not knowing what to cook by giving them an easy way to discover healthy but tasty recipes. And we will know if our product works when we see 150 daily active users. This is a made-up number, just for example's sake.
Think of this as a blueprint, and we're going to be coming back to this example throughout this webinar, because what we want you to see is how easy it is to make decisions based on what you defined here at the beginning. We are starting by the general principle, and we will start getting into the details as we move forward. But first, think of this as a system in which you're going to have an output. The output is the product, but your input is going to be the problem you are trying to solve, and who are you solving this problem for? That is the target audience and the problem that you are tackling. And then what you do with this input is the actual strategy, the vision of what you're trying to solve, and how are you going to solve it.
How are you going to solve it? Yeah, and the output will be the features, the parts that conform the actual product or be an application or a website or whatever it is, and your goals, what you're going to accomplish in detail with your application.
And this is also a cycle, because once you have your first deliverable, once you first launch your product into the market, you will start learning by user research. What did you did well, and what went wrong, and perhaps the problem changed, or you learn something new about the problem, and perhaps you discover something new about your target audience as well. So the whole process should begin again. And remember that products become meaningful when the provided solution fits the uncovered problem. So for each problem, there should be a solution, but the solution is the product, and the product are the features. This is the right way to think of features, so you don't suffer of feature creep. Okay, so now that you define your vision, now it's time to get to the actual work and get to the nitty-gritty details of it. So let's talk for a second about information architecture. This is something that people might not dedicate too much time on it because they might not find it useful, but we're going to show you how useful it is actually to get everybody on the same page.
And an easy way to define it.
Right. So we have the vision. Now we need to work on the architecture. And this is something that we have been starting to do at Nearsoft. We call it object-oriented mapping. And it's basically a framework in which you're going to contrast how people think versus how we build products. Because when we as persons, as humans, interact with the world, we think of objects, of things that are tangible, and we want to manipulate. And it should be no different on the digital world and the applications. Let me exemplify it with this example of our application of food and recipes. So we have our young folks thinking of, food. They're thinking of spaghetti. They're thinking of meals. They're thinking of ingredients that they have on their fridge. I'm having tomatoes on my fridge. I have pasta, and I have basil, for instance. And I'm also thinking about chefs and people that might know recipes for me, or restaurants even. So this is how we interact with the world, actually.
Yeah, we think of things in function of the relation we have with the things. In this case, it's food.
But when we start to design interfaces and web applications, we start doing this. We start thinking of actions, browsing, comparing, selecting, and buying. And we kind of lose track of how people actually expect to manipulate those objects.
This is somewhat disconnected from the what users actually think.
Yeah, because the world is made of objects and the actions we perform with them. But then when the developers start building the system architecture, they're going to be doing the same thing as people think of the world. They're going to start doing this what they call object-oriented programming. They transform the elements into objects again: customers, products, orders, sections, and the connections that these objects have between them.
Yeah, the databases talk about objects in a very similar way to the users thinking.
Think of those times in which you enter a restaurant. The first thing that you notice when you enter are the tables and the chairs and the glasses and the beer and the knives and the plates and the forks and all that. And then you start thinking that you perform actions with those objects. You eat on them, you drink with the glass, you bake the food in the oven, and then chefs are going to be cooking the meals in the kitchen, right? So it's all about objects and actions that you do to those objects. But the same thing happens in the digital world.
Yeah, we tend to think as objects only in the real world, but when you visit something on the web, you actually see objects too. For example, in this case, if you're visiting a recipe site, you're gonna see a recipe as an object, and that object has actions you can perform with it. For example, you can share it, you can save it, and the object also has content, has information that conforms the object itself.
This is something really abstract to get your head around it, and it all makes sense when you start doing the actual exercise in practice. And don't forget that the objects are the actual meat of the application. This is what the users are coming to look for in your application. This is the shiny objects that they expect to see in your application.
The meat.
The meat, exactly. So let's think of Uber for a second. What the object that you are trying to manipulate on Uber is the actual ride, the car. In Instagram could be like the pictures, right? You share the picture, you love the picture, and you follow people, the photographers that took the pictures. It's all again objects and actions.
It might sound a bit complicated, but we were discussing something interesting in the rehearsals, which was this is very similar to how we as users or as human beings, our mental model of learning how the world works is basically based in this. Like, imagine you're in a dark room. The moment the light turns on, your brain automatically starts seeing objects, like, for example, a table, a window, and then you can start calculating what you can do with those objects. So we might take it for granted because our brain does that for us automatically. And I think that's what when people say, wow, kids know how to use an iPad or an app, I think it's because if you figure out how to understand the user's mental model, then it'll be something automatic for them to use that interface or to interact with that application. So maybe take a step back if you're having a hard time and just think about how you analyze the world, and you'll figure out that this is basically that.
Exactly.
Yes, our brains are hardwired to see objects and to learn to interact with them.
Exactly.
So this is what where this come from.
And this is how the exercise looks in real life. This is basically an exercise with sticky notes in which you're gonna define the complete architecture of your product even before moving one single pixel or writing one single line of code. This is gonna be the map of your complete application before you build it. And let's go back to our example of our chef applications and recipe applications. So we are building an app to discover chefs and recipes with healthy ingredients, right? It's easy to see that the objects in this application are the chefs, the recipes, and the ingredients. These are the things that users are expecting to manipulate in the application. And if you put the objects in blue sticky notes, you'll start the exercise in the right direction. Now what you need to do is to complete each one of the objects with particular information that compose that object. That is the content. If you put the content of each one of the objects in a yellow sticky notes, you will start completing the exercise. Let me give you one example. For instance, the content of the object chef could be the name of the profile pic or the bio. In the case of the recipe, could be the title, the images, the steps, and the description. That is what needs to be present in order for the object to be an object.
Yeah, what does the chef need to be a chef in our application?
And also in the head of people, of the users that we are trying to build the product for. And the other step of the exercise is to put the metadata into pink sticky notes. That is secondary information that describes the object. Could be like the number of followers a chef has, or perhaps the level of difficulty that a recipe requires, or the date the recipe was posted, or the number of favorite that recipe has.
Yeah, this is information the users can use to filter objects, but it's not essential for the object to be the object. If you strip out the number of followers from a chef, it's still chef.
Right, and this is also good for everybody because you are defining the complete architecture of the system before building it, and even you can define the actions for each one of the objects. If you put this in green sticky notes.
Yeah, this is the actions you're gonna perform with or to the object. For example, create, edit, like, delete. The chefs, the recipes, or the ingredients. This is very cool because this is how developers think. They think always of actions to perform to the objects because that's what their craft does.
Exactly, and this is also good for product managers and business people because they can step in and say during the exercise, hey guys, remember that the recipe needs to be shared across social networks. So don't forget to put that action in the first version of the product, right? And then things start to get really interesting when you start seeing the relationship between those objects, because a chef will create recipes, and the recipes will have ingredients, and the ingredients will belong to our particular recipe. So all of a sudden, what you have is a complete definition of each one of the objects and the relationships between them. And the exercise start to look like this. And all of a sudden, if you do this for every single object in the exercise, you will have the complete map of your application even before you build this. This is really cool because it gets everybody on the same page. The designer knows what to design. The developers need to how to build the actual system.
Yeah, for example, I, as a UI designer, love this stage because you're seeing 4 rows of data here in the screen. I can take any any row of this diagram and translate it almost directly into an interface, a single interface or a module in the application, and that's how we translate. This is a prototype or a wireframe of the application we designed with the exercise.
It's really easy to jump it's really easy to jump from the exercise into the first version of the prototype, because as you can see here, when you are designing the recipe, it's easy to accommodate the actions that you already defined in your content structure, or the relationship between the objects. Perhaps if you are on the recipe, you might want to jump into the chef that made this recipe and how many recipes that chef has. Remember that we are still on the realm of system architecture.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of abstract to get your head around, but it really pays off.
Once you actually do this exercise, it becomes really clear and you get somehow addicted to it.
So if you ask us how to structure the content of your application, I will say to go for this exercise, because it will make you structure the content in the way people expect to find it. That's really cool.
And it's been a series of steps. Like we can be reminded of the thing we call the blueprint, which was just 5 easy questions. Exactly. And then after that, we started seeing it as a cycle when we can get the team involved and start making decisions around it, then calling how to solve that problem and turn it into objects and actions. So it's a little. I mean, it's little steps of a big ladder that will end up in a wireframe, a working prototype.
So we're getting there. Be patient. Be patient, because we're now going to the fun part. Because we have the building ready, the skeleton is ready. Now we need to infuse it with life to make it come alive and start the decoration of it. And now it's time to talk about content.
You gotta know your content, right? And to know your content, you gotta know your users, what they come to your application. And if you did the blueprint at the beginning of this webinar, you already know what you want to build and what your users are and what their problem is. So you're starting with the right foot. So when you know this, you start planning your content accordingly. For example, if you want to build an application for people to eat healthy, you know you're gonna start sourcing these recipes from other sources, from other chefs or something, into your application.
Sorry, I was just going to mention that this is something that you already defined on the product vision. That's what's really cool about it,
this
right?
is if you take your product vision, you know what content are you going to put in your application, and then once your content is there and your users are interacting with it, you start learning through analytics and research what your users' habits are, how they react to different kinds of content in there. And then, sorry?
Yeah, I was just going to bring back the example that we have of the recipes. Perhaps if we could learn what the recipe is for. Perhaps you are cooking for a friend or your significant other, or perhaps you are cooking for yourself in the middle of the night. Your application should know
that happens.
That context,
That's
right?
sad.
So we can give you the right recipe for the right moment.
Yeah,
it could be even. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm really not sorry, but I'm supposed to say that because we're like.
We know you're
So anyway, it could be even by the type of user you are. Imagine I'm going first into a low calorie count recipe, so then the app figures that out and starts sorting out only that kind of recipe. And then for some reason, I don't know what reason, but I become a vegetarian. So then so then the app can tell that I'm a low calorie vegetarian, and it can give me that content so I can be happy eating what I like with the flavors that I like. And it's only based on basically my habits.
Yeah, exactly. So once you know said habits, you can start prioritizing the content. So you know that Jorge likes vegetarian, low calorie recipes. Then that becomes his shiny objects, these exact pieces of content, and I can start putting shiny objects in front of him. Sorry. Um, when you don't really know how the habits of your users are, you're left with a linear content offer, no prioritization at all. The newer content comes first, and the older content comes last. But as soon as you start doing analytics on your application, you start noticing that some pieces of content stand out. And this is the pieces of content people really like, and if you already know this, you can put them in front of people. So when they come to your application, they get what they're looking for right away. When you keep doing this research and analytics and interpreting everything, and you have a lot of content, you can then start doing only tailored content offer. So every time Jorge comes to our recipes application, he's only gonna see healthy, low-calorie recipes, and not everything else. And this is really cool. But when you have a lot of knowledge and a lot of content,
Does that mean you're gonna eliminate all other kinds of recipes, or it's just like an order?
no, the rest of the recipes will be discoverable in the application.
Okay.
But we already know you're not interested in that. Maybe you want to look something because you're cooking for your significant other or your mom or your grandma, but it's not the usual thing for you
Okay.
to do, right? And to sum it up, with no research, with no analytics, you're left with only chronological content offer. When you start doing analytics and research, you can switch to a chronological slash algorithmic approach. And when you have a lot of content and a lot of knowledge already about your users, you can go fully algorithmic. And this is gonna be really well performed. It's gonna perform really well, but it takes a little bit of knowledge and content.
Cool. So how about when you, I mean, how often we should provide the application with content? How much?
Yeah, the
We
update
should
rate,
change.
the how often you should renew the content. This is gonna well for to know this, you need to identify the time your users require to consume one piece of content. For example, for a tweet, it's gonna be like 2 or 3 seconds maybe. But for a recipe, you need to read it, get the ingredients, actually cook the meal, and then wait at least a couple hours to start cooking again. So this is gonna take some time. And how much time does it take for them to come back for more content? And how much time and effort do they invest in getting the piece of content itself?
Right, because perhaps a recipe might require just a few minutes to read it, and a movie might require like much time to
Yeah, in a
consume it,
TV
right?
series from Netflix may take 2 or 3 weeks.
And how much effort a user should invest in getting that piece of content. Perhaps a notification can reduce the amount of time that a user requires to get access to that recipe or movie, perhaps.
Yeah, it happens a lot with tweets. The notification has the tweet itself, so it's almost zero effort.
So let's say now that you have your content ready and you identify the habits and the context, but will your content create a habit in your users' minds? This is something that is really tricky, but it's really interesting if you manage to do it well. There are some questions that you should ask yourself when you're building your product in order to make users to come back for more. If you answer these questions and make like a summary or a checklist for each one of these questions, you might be able to identify the right strategy to make users to come back for more. So let's go for each one of them. The first one is identify the triggers that move your users into coming into your application. These are internal motivations that they have to come back and consume that recipe. Do I want to make my significant other feel well, or perhaps I want to throw a party for my friends and cook for them? So what is my motivation actually as a user? And also, what are the external triggers that prompts the user to come back for your application for a recipe? That is, are you sending notifications, or perhaps they
Maybe if it's time to eat already, or it's approaching the lunchtime, you can send a notification that maybe they want to look for a recipe.
Exactly. So just make a list of the triggers, internal triggers, motivations, and the external triggers. Those are related to your application, to the interface itself. And then start to identify the actions that the users need to make to consume that piece of content. And these are always simple actions. It should be like the simplest action to perform in anticipation of the reward that they are getting. That is, if I do this little action, let's say I just enter the application and follow the notification that you send me, and I'm going to get the recipe right away. So what are the actions that the user need to make to get that reward? And then obviously are a list of rewards that they get. Sometimes could be like simple likes for your recipe, perhaps if you uploaded a recipe into the application, or perhaps it's just something more intangible that you made your significant other feel well with it. And then identify the amount of work that they need to do in order to come back for more. So that is, what is it that I need to do to get that recipe in the first place? The less the work a user invests, the more likely is to come back again for more.
Yeah, and the biggest the reward was, right?
So this exercise is more like a checklist. Identify triggers, action, rewards, and the investment. And all of a sudden, it takes the form of a loop. And this is basic human behavior. We have a trigger, and we need to make an action to get that reward. And we need to invest some work to get that reward. And then that reward should be fulfilling, but in a way that will leave you wanting for more. So you will come back.
That sounds like something addictive. It reminds me of I have a Netflix obsession. Like every day from 8 to 10 p.m., I'm a slave to Netflix. And basically, what they do is put all the things that I'm seeing in my face. So that's sort of my trigger. Then my action is to click the button, and I need to complete that because it will keep reminding me, even if I have to finish the whole series or movie, so it doesn't remind me anymore. So my reward is like my calm, cool heart. And then the worst part is I go back into the app and I see like, well, I see you like this movie, so you might like these other movies. So I'm in like an endless cycle of keep watching that. And basically, I mean, it makes me happy, but I feel like I have a problem now.
This is a great example. You are sliding forever in this spiral.
Yep.
Right?
But you can actually do this in your product. You can make your product to be addictive in a way, so users can keep coming back for more. And also you can measure this with metrics. If you set up events for each one of the buttons that are the triggers or the actions that required,
Or the piece of content.
or the piece of content, or even the reward. Perhaps the reward is the like that you have. You can measure that in your product. Obviously, it takes time to do it and to master it, but the more you invest in this kind of a strategy, the more benefits you will gain, because you will learn more about your users through your application. And that's
and even a small effort in this sense pays well.
right.
This is very interesting.
So let's sum things up. We now have the takeaways to finalize what we were talking about. The first one is obviously the product vision that you should define at the beginning about what to build. And this is really important because you get everybody on the same page. So product managers, developers, designers, or whoever is participating on the product has a clear idea of what is it that we are trying to accomplish. And it's really easy to make decisions in the future when you come back to this blueprint that we talked about in the beginning.
Yes. And also, always remember, user first equal content first. If you know your users and you're starting this process from a point of knowledge of your users, and then the content, it's gonna fall naturally into your application. You're gonna know what content should your application have, and this is very important.
These are the objects that we describe in the exercise. The content and the content should be the objects that users expect to manipulate in your application. And then the other one is just think about content as being alive. Let's think of the way water,
Fills up.
fills up any
recipient.
vessel. Yeah, exactly. So your content should be this entity that's alive, and that it will fit into the context of use of your users and how they use it in a daily basis.
Yes, and also remember that people comes to your application for its content and not for the features themselves, right?
Because they are expecting to have some kind of reward in the end. So the feature should accommodate for the job that the users expect to do in your application, and the job should be getting that object in the beginning. But that object will fulfill a specific reward. And this is where it's important to identify those triggers that will make the users get that reward, that object that they want to see. And you can prepare this stage for it. If you identify the loop that we discussed a few slides ago, trigger, actions, reward, and the investment required to get that.
That will make me addicted.
If you nail it down, the identification of the triggers, you can be there before the user even knows that they have a need. And this is really cool. Is that Google Now does.
We're almost done. We've been walking. This has been quite a race. Like from the 5 basic questions of the blueprint or the starting sketch, then to naming things as an object through object-oriented UX, to making wireframes, to creating addiction. I think it's been a great ride, but I'd like to just ask for some more of your time to answer some questions.
Sure.
I have only
Sure.
4 questions here. I'm going to read the first one out loud. This is by Alexander. It says, I'm part of a team of a very big app full of features. How can I structure content on a massive, already existing product?
What you should do here is identify what features are actually being used, and perhaps you can read this with analytics or metrics to see if something is not really being used at all. I was one part of a team that were building a specific feature for 3 months, and then we realized that no one was really using that feature. You can also run this study that we call Kano analysis. Is somewhat complex study to grasp into explaining in one single question, answer in this webinar. But basically what the study does is to measure the amount of satisfaction that each trigger each feature will trigger on particular users.
So one way to keep it simple is if you have a very big app, just focus on whatever's next on the design iteration, for example.
And what you could do also is a card sorting. A card sorting will make users to tell you the answers on how to structure the content, because in a way that makes sense to them. So basically what you do is just put the sections, for instance, of your system in cards, and you give these cards to users, and they will start sorting them out in a way that makes sense to them. And all of a sudden, when you do this exercise with many users, you will start to see patterns of how people expect to see features distributed in a system. This is what Amazon does as well. If you notice, Amazon has never redesigned their site completely. They start doing this little by little because they perhaps studying the checkout process first, and if there's something that needs to be changed or tweaked, they do it just that part. So it's actually Amazon is like a living creature that's already it's
Yes,
always
and
changing.
changing a big application can be overwhelming, but maybe you can do that. You can take a flow or a group of features and focus on that for the change first.
You need to have some data. Perhaps the navigation is not working, so focus on the navigation first. Or perhaps the checkout process is not working, so.
Yeah, any change should come from data, from actual user data.
But don't overwhelm yourself with changing the complete system right away.
Step by step.
It's step by step, exactly.
Also, that can alienate your users, so that's not a good thing to do.
We have another question. It says, can this object-oriented approach be tailored into some other prototyping models, or is it a standalone method? That's by Sue.
This is something that you could do. Let me go again. This is something you do before prototyping. So whichever technique of prototyping you decide to use, this model will fit into that, because this is not prototyping itself. This is just a list of every object that will be present in your system. How you accommodate that into your prototype or the technique that you decide to use, it's independent, but
Yes.
it's closely related. But one should not decide exactly the technique of the other one.
Yes, this is a bridge between your vision and your prototype, and you can use any kind of prototyping technique you want to use.
If you reach out to us, we can share more text and techniques about object-oriented UX mapping. This is something really interesting that you should definitely check out with more detail. Just let us know, and we'll reach out to you.
We have a comment here that I would like you to comment on. I'm sorry if I interrupted. I'm assuming all the parties are involved in the whole content structure process. For example, if Axel as a front-end developer or someone else as a back-end developer sees an action is missing on our map, they'll add a post, for example.
Exactly. There's some really cool activity that you could do with the map once you already have it. That is, you start identifying with perhaps with another sticky note, or perhaps with just a single mark. You can say this is for the first sprint, perhaps this is for the second milestone, or perhaps we're not going to use this action or this element or this metadata or this content in the first version that we're building. So if something is not relevant for the first version or the second version, you just cross it. Or on the other side, you can just add it.
And this technique is especially cool to use with the whole team, because you're not designing anything yet and you're not coding anything yet, but on the contrary, every member of the team can give their opinion and put sticky notes there, and then you can refine it if it's necessary, but it's more like a brainstorming technique also.
We have two last questions. This one kind of ties in with this one. It says, when working with developers, what is the best way to sell the importance of UX or prototyping before building? That's from Luis.
I've been getting a clear understanding of what to do here. Think of coins that you start earning. Think of a game, right? The more you bring feedback of users into the team, and they see the value of it, perhaps by inviting developers into the process of getting feedback, perhaps you can invite them into the usability testings, and they see how they work and how users struggle with the system they are developing. They will start to see the value of it. So the more you bring this knowledge into the team, the more they will give you room for it. So when I said coins is the idea of, I bring you these coins because I earn them. Does it make sense, Jorge?
Yeah, it does.
It's like I'm getting points each time I bring developers into the usability testings and they see.
Yeah,
it's like I'm gaining more time.
Yeah, it's like having it's not a one-time occurrence. It's like you need to be gaining maybe the respect, maybe the coins, maybe they can see changes on the app, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no magic solution.
So I started to invite developers into the usability testings, and they now are allowing me to make this more often. They are opening the time into the process so we can do that together.
Yeah. Also, your effort should go to understand both designers and developers that we're not in separate things. We're not
Okay.
doing different things. We're all together developing a product. So maybe our tools and our techniques are a little bit different, but in the end, they're just tools and techniques to develop a product. So we're doing the same thing, just with different tools, with different thinking, and we are part of the same effort. So slowly try to get your team to realize they are a team, a single team.
So we're like all in the same boat, and if it sinks, we all sink and die.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a bit unhopeful, but
Also, there's always someone in the team, some developer in the team that already knows the value of design and UX, and you should team up with that particular person, and this person will start to spread up the good news with the rest of the teams. So there's always someone. You just need to identify that someone.
okay.
And
Like
and
your
also-
covert agent, like
yeah, it's like
your
a
double agent.
and then what happens is that all of a sudden you realize that your design is not the most important part of the process, but neither is the developing process. Not even it's not
Okay.
even the code itself.
Mhm.
So it's not design, it's not code. It's the product that you need to make it stronger.
Yeah,
Eh,
all our
but-
efforts go to make a good
So
product.
the important part is the product, but beyond the product is how this product will fit into the user's life.
Okay.
So all of a sudden is the users first, yes, but in the team is the product that you need to make stronger.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're both gonna love the last question because it's so general. It comes from Eme. He said, or she said, how can you differentiate what a user wants from what they really need?
I think this takes time to make the difference, and let's remember that Steve Jobs said that people do not know what they want until they see it. I think it's partially right, and what you need to do is just keep an eye on your users, keep doing user research until you have a clear understanding what is it that they need, because they can verbalize something and they can tell you what they need, but that's might not be exactly it. You need to read between the lines.
Yeah.
You also need to read what they say, but also see what they behave in
Oh,
your
okay.
application. That's if when those things are the same, then you know that what they say is what they need.
Exactly, because we often do opposite as what we say. So need to watch them in
So
action.
humans are complex, and we're
We
kind
are
of
complex.
liars, or we don't know we're lying, but we might be lying.
Yeah, I may say I want to lose weight, but then I go and eat 10 tacos.
I told you
After
not
this,
to say that on
so,
air for
yeah.
my life. No, I'm kidding. No, I know, but sometimes it's embedded in the way we are as human beings. Like maybe I think I need a bigger car or a bigger phone or even some kind of a sharing feature for my recipe app, but maybe I don't even share things. I just think it's cool, so I'm not going to use it. And then the team is going to waste money and resources and time in developing something I really didn't need, and all you needed to do was watch me not share the thing.
Yeah, remember Dr. House? Everybody lies.
I know. So we have some questions we'll be answering by email on a further date, perhaps Monday. I don't know. I'm kidding. We'll be answering them shortly. But we're all out of time. I just want to say that if you want to know more, you can visit ux.nearsoft.com and get a bigger understanding or a bigger idea of what it is that we do. Or you can send us a line to ux-team@nearsoft.com. Or if you like it the old-fashioned way, you can call Sandra, who's a great person and our business developer. Hello to Sandra. She's traveling.
Hello, Sandra.
She's traveling the world right now. She's always busy, but she's always there on the phone, and you can call her too, or at 408-890-2115. This makes me feel like in the radio station. That's again 408-890-2115, as if you couldn't see it on the slide. And that's all for us today. Thank you for spending an hour of your time with us, and thank you, Axel and Misael, for your time too.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you very much, and reach out to us if you want to keep talking about it. We love it.
Yep, we're passionate. Bye.
Bye.